Before I tell you about the videotapes, I need to give you a bit of context. When I was 10 years old, 2 days before my family and I moved to a new home, our house was burgled. We'd gone out for lunch at our soon-to-not-be local Indian to celebrate successfully packing up our entire lives into labelled boxes and piling the big pieces of furniture into the now unusable front room. I was 10. My sister was 13, and my brother was 8. We'd never moved house before. For 2 months, the whole endeavour seemed to involve a lot more stress, shouting, mess, and chaos than it did excitement. But now that it was finally done, we were thrilled at the thought of moving to a new, bigger place in the suburbs of the city. We returned to our house with smashed windows, smeared dirt on the carpets from hurried feet and muddied boots, and several of the boxes missing. Turns out, if you carefully label boxes with things like TV, camcorder, hi-fi, silverware, etc., you're basically hanging a neon sign above your valuables. We were devastated. The loss of so many expensive pieces of electronics was bad enough. We'd just moved house. How could we afford a new TV, etc.? But if any of you have ever been burgled, you'll know the sense of violation and fear is pretty grim. My mum refused to stay another night in the house. I kid you not, we took laundry totes filled with the sleeping bags we took on family camping holidays and went to camp in our new, empty living room. If it wasn't such a miserable situation, it would have been an adventure. Of all the items we'd lost, perhaps the saddest loss was the VHS camcorder. This was the 1990s, and no one was uploading their films straight to the cloud. We had a hulking black Panasonic that made your arm ache to hold after 5 minutes, and it had recorded the birthdays, Christmases, picnics, school plays, karate exams, and recorder concerts of the last few years. Naturally, all the VHSs were in the box with the camcorder itself. Everything was gone. We got over it. We moved into our new happy home. We joined a new school, made new friends, created new family memories. We grew up, moved out. We forgot, more or less, about the burglary, though I will say that, for as long as I lived with my parents, there were 3 different locks on the front door. Recently, I was reminded of the burglary because a friend of mine had had her flat burgled while she was at work. I sent her a message offering any help I could and told her about my experiences when I was 10. It did set me thinking, for the first time in ages, about my old camcorder. More out of nostalgia than anything else, I went on eBay to see if I could find any old Panasonics. I may as well admit here, I'm the sort of dick who buys vinyl and gets camera film developed. VHS camcorders are up my idiot street. So imagine my shock when I saw our camcorder for sale on eBay. I knew it was ours because our dad, the ever ultimate dad, had carefully Tippexed the family name on one side, doubtless sending the value plummeting. I was amazed the thieves hadn't thought to scrape it off. Actually, I should have thought about that more carefully at the time, but I was just so stunned. I bought the lot immediately. When it arrived a few days later, it even had a batch of old videotapes with it. I couldn't believe my luck. I'd brought our memories home. It took me a few days to track down a working video player, but as soon as I did, I was ready to watch the videos. I hadn't told my family yet. I was saving it up to have them all round to dinner. I'd recently moved into a flat of my own, and I wanted to surprise them. All the tapes were dated. Dad again. So I started from the beginning and worked my way through. Everything was normal. Or, well, relatively normal. Families are weird and kids are weird, and there was a lot that made me laugh. until I got to the tapes of our final few months in the house. My tape opened with my brother's 8th birthday. We'd had a party at the house, in our tiny garden. My brother got a Tamagotchi. Only 90s kids will remember, etc. And there was a great close-up shot of him peering at the thing and exclaiming, "He did a poo!" in a voice people normally reserve for, "I've got the job," or "You're going to be a grandmother." There was an incredible shot of the cake, made by my mother and inexpertly iced by my father, sinking slightly under the weight of the candlestick candles my brother insisted they use instead of birthday cake candles. But then, halfway through the happy birthday song, the tape cut out. I thought it was just an old tape that had deteriorated and the rest of the footage was lost. But as I got up to eject the video, I realized that the tape hadn't cut out. It had been filmed over. Someone was recording in the dark, seemingly pointing the camera down to the floor. No sooner had I realized this than the camera swung up. I could make out 5 petal-shaped glass panes arranged in a semicircle, through which a dull orange light shone through. It took me a few seconds to realize what I was seeing. It was the glass above the front door in my childhood house, seen from the inside. The orange light was made by the street lamp outside. I thought, oh my god, typical dad. He only bloody recorded over Jimmy's 8th birthday when he was fiddling with a thing one night. My dad was, and is, an insomniac, and an inveterate fiddler with technology. The shot swung around again, and I could just about make out our staircase. My dad was taking the stairs confidently in the dark. Obviously, he'd been going up and down them since my sister was brought home as a newborn 13 years before. The camera paused in the hallway and headed to the bathroom I used to share with my brother. You could see a line of warm light in the darkness. I couldn't sleep with the door closed. Still can't. And my brother Jimmy couldn't sleep without a nightlight. In my dad went and filmed our little angelic sleeping faces for, I fancied, a tad too long. I looked forward to making fun of him about this when I showed my family the tapes. The next room he filmed was my sister's. My sister was a pretty girl and grew up to be a beautiful, smart-ass woman. But when she slept, she looked like a drooling cookie monster. And boy did she snore. Those snores filled up my sound system like a hive of bees wielding tiny bee chainsaws into a microphone. Again, the filming went on for slightly too long, and it was a bit creepy to be honest. In the next shot, the camera was in my parents' room, filming my sleeping parents. Both of them. The realization hit me like a wave of ice water, and then the tape really did cut out. I sat frozen with panic for a few seconds, then threw myself down and started going through the last of the tapes. It was the same every time. Partway through some fond memory, the tape would cut out. The semicircle of glass would come into view, and the unknown camera person would make their way up the stairs to linger over the bodies of my sleeping, vulnerable family. It was a different night each time. The pajamas and the bedsheets would change, though the digital clock in my parents' room invariably showed the time between 3 and 4 a.m. There were no clues as to who this person was. They were completely silent. I couldn't even hear breathing. The filming was surprisingly level and absolutely disciplined. They never passed in front of a mirror or varied the angle at which they filmed us. They were just there, waiting, silent, omnipresent, watching us. I didn't find any kind of variation until the penultimate tape. In the penultimate tape, In the long minutes filming in my parents' room, my dad snorts and stirs. He rolls over, mumbles. He seems on the cusp of waking. The camera jerks as if the person holding it was startled and swings down slightly as if they'd loosen their hold. For a few moments, a hand is visible, flexing in the darkness. Then, abruptly, the camera rights itself and pulls back out of my parents' room. Very, very slowly, it turns upwards, towards the ceiling. It focuses on the fire alarm, and then the hand comes into view again. The hand freaked me out something awful. It didn't look like a normal hand. The skin was pink, clumpy, twisted, as if it had been melted and hardened again. The fingers were bent, crushed. Black rings of dirt were packed under the nails, but despite its malformation, perhaps its injury, the hand dexterously reaches up to the fire alarm, opens it, and takes out the batteries. This video is dated 4 days before the house was burgled. The last video is dated on the day. It starts with my mother, a terrible camera woman. The focus is all over the place, filming the empty rooms and encouraging us to say goodbye to the house. My sister, a teenager, refuses to play along, but my brother and I are yelling, "Bye, house!" with gusto. But before we even get upstairs, the tape cuts out again, and a totally unfamiliar room comes into frame. I didn't really take a lot of this room in. It was messy. There were a lot of screwed up tissues, pot noodles, and empty cans on the various surfaces. There was a big pile of what looked like laundry in the corner. A slob lived here. The camera doesn't linger long, moves quickly across the small, messy room, out into a hallway. There's the sound of something on a TV in another room. The camera follows the noise. A door is pushed open. In the next room is a boy. As a child, I probably would have called him a man. As a grown-up now, I think he was a boy no more than 17. Acne-pitted, terrible boy band curtains, but quite good looking underneath. I can make out some piles of boxes behind him. TV, hi-fi, silverware. When I was a kid, I'd imagined a group of hardened men in dark glasses with walkie-talkies smashing into our poor home in a stealth operation. I hadn't imagined some opportunistic teenagers and his pals. He's playing a video game, his face lit by the blue screen. From the TV comes the sound of pre-recorded grunts, some kind of fighting game. The next things happen very quickly. The boy looks up. He begins to frame the "what of, what do you want," or "what the hell?" His eyes go huge with fear. His mouth drops open. He scrambles to his feet. The camera lurches. There's a "no" in a cracked voice. Then an ear-splitting scream. The camera drops to the floor, filming the pile of boxes. The boy is screaming, "No, no, help! Help me, somebody! Help me! Somebody, help!" There are sickening snapping noises, howls of sheer animal agony. A slash of red blood splats across the box. The assailant makes no sound whatsoever. The video cuts out. As you can imagine, after a few seconds of shock, I called the police and handed the tapes over. They were put in an evidence locker, and I spent a sleepless night with a heavy table wedged against my front door and a pot of coffee. The next morning, the officer who signed the receipt for the videos called me. "I'd like to talk to you about wasting police time," he said, in a voice that suggested he delivered the lecture many times before. I didn't understand, I said. Didn't he see the last tape in the box? The screaming? The blood? As it turned out, the tapes were completely blank. No happy memories, no creepy nighttime filming, no murder. Just white noise. I didn't understand how the tapes could go from filled to empty in just one night at the station. I marched down there and demanded a viewing, in a well-lit room in the company of 2 police officers. They were right. Nothing but white noise. And it has only just occurred to me now. That malformed, broken, sickening hand that had taken the batteries out of the fire alarm on the ceiling, 9 feet up. Maybe camera person is the wrong word.